This video is to quickly show you how to use document view in Layer and how to set up a report. So here I have an FF&E project example, and I'm using this because there are 4 different layouts here that show you that there are many different ways that you can style your report, all created in document view. And if you wanted to find this template, that is located right here. When you create a category, this will pop up, and then you can load in these categories with this FF&E template, which will have these views set up. So if I wanted to create a document view, I'll go to create a new view, select document, and this will be document view, and I'll actually title it from template because we do have built-in templates. And after I clicked create, the next one is the templates. So I'm going to do product presentation because that's the most similar to product specs. It should be the same. The fields might be a little different, but it'll try to match the fields that it was built upon. If I wanted to change the field that is mapped, I could select it here. I actually don't use this too much. I just go ahead and create the document and it'll give me the layout. So anytime I open up a document view, I like to see the structure of it, and you can do that by seeing here in the page settings, what size is it? It's a portrait letter size with 1/2-inch margins. And then if I click into edit here, I can see the layout that it's built. So I don't really want to use this layout, but I wanted to show you that we have pre-built templates to help, and you can create your own templates. That will be in the same place actually, because let's say I like this template here, this document view template. I can create a document template, and this is how you will be creating your company templates. So I'll just leave it there, sample product template, a description to help identify it in the future. You don't need to customize block names, but if you wanted to, the different pieces, the elements, the fields that we have loaded on, you could rename them here. I don't think you need to customize them and get into that much detail. And then when you save it, you can use it later on to create your reports quickly. If you have the same project and you made a new template and you wanted to update it, you can do that through document view templates, which you create here. And then where I found it, where I created it here, I'll just call this one test. And then you would go to company, and that is where you'll see your company templates, like the one I've just created. I forgot what I called it already, so we'll just leave it there. And I'm actually going to delete this to exit out of this. So this is from template, but actually another way I like to work with document view is from scratch. And I'll just name it that to keep it clear. Document view. And here we have document styles. I actually have a style where I have everything set to Arial and 10 point. And I'll do that. Create with current filter sorts. That is for the elements. We'll leave that alone. We don't need that right now, and we can always apply them later. So I'm going to create my view, and I'm gonna ignore these templates for layer templates and my company templates. And I'm gonna start from scratch. Now you have a completely blank document page. If I wanted to change the settings, for example, change it to 11 by 17 and landscape, you can see the proportions have now changed. But for the most part, portrait works for most users, so I'll switch it back to that. Another thing, these are your sort and filter, same as your other views. And this is where everything happens in document view. I'll click edit, and now I have this builder on the side. I'll start with headers and footers. You can see that when I clicked both, and then it dropped a header here and a footer here. And there's only one header and footer on page, so you can select it, but header and footers actually work where I can also select it by clicking that. Or I can, if I zoom in, you can see that I could delete these blocks. So we're calling everything here on the page blocks. I'll And let me mention this toolbar at the bottom. This toolbar is a navigator to different elements. Well, right now it won't show because I haven't placed anything yet. And also PDFing the full report of 11 elements or just the single page of CH03. And then if I click open, I can see this element detail that I would in the other views. And that's handy, but we'll get into that more later when we have more on the page. And let's start setting things up. So containers are very important. They're how you'll create the layout of the page. Here we have things that help us build the page, like adding text, dates, spacers. And then here and below, you have element data. This is metadata. That's first. And then here are the fields that are created in the project. They're in the same order as the element detail. So description, location, and that helps when you have a lot of fields that they're in the same order. So I can show you how containers work by in the header here. Everything is drag drop. So I'm going to drag on a 2-column container. And I do this so I can have things side by side. And let me drop some things in and I can explain more what I mean. So I'm going to drop a static image here, which is how we'll use a logo. And I'll put the project name. Okay, I was looking for this project name over here. And when I drop it on, this block is pulling that project name and I can set the font settings for that. And I'll leave that alone for now. So then we'll put today's date. Sometimes this could be like the date I'm printed at. And you can see this block has its own settings. I'll put in a logo by uploading a new logo. And then start is left justified, center or right justified. So once it loads, I'll put it to the right side. Okay, and we'll do end. So a few things I want to mention here. There is a root container here. If I click this, you can see that there's a root container for the page and that's contained. And let's see. I don't want to undo that, but it already has a container on the page. This is not dropped. There's like a base container. But I like to use containers because it helps moving things around and making layouts. So a single column container, let me close this. If I dragged in the same 3 blocks, let's see, that project name. Oh, here's a tip for dropping things. I'm going to click the title of the block and click hold, and then now you see this green line which shows you where you're allowed to drop things in. If I hover in it, it's green, and let me do that again. So since I know the container is here, it's easy to get it out because I just go below where the container is. To get it in, you see like here it moves above it. But if I click drag and I'm hovering here, but then hover into the box, that's how I can get it in. So a few things. Oh, let me go back to what I was saying. I did project name, current date, and a static image. So as I'm dropping things into the container, and you can see it here again, this is a full width green bar, but when I go up a little, is dropping it inside. And I'll put it here, and let's select the layer logo, and it's at start. So everything is full width of the container, and they're stacking, as I'm dropping them in below each other, they're coming below, like one below the other. So that's why I'm using the 2-column container here to get them next to each other. And you do that, you achieve these layouts through the containers. it gets a lot easier once you get the hang of it. So that's just kind of like go with the logic of that, and it'll make more sense as you drop things in. Few other things I want to note that are helpful to understand about containers is that they all come when you drag them onto the page with a default setting of 5 pixels, I think. 5 for padding and 5 for margin. And let me use this container here, set a background color on it, lower the transparency a little. But you can see that this container, the margin is outside of the gray box, and the padding is the contents to the edge of the container. And I'll increase those so you can see. So margin is outside. If I increase this to 10, maybe that would help if I put, oops, okay, well, that might not help. Oh, I can do this as black and this container as white. Okay. So if I change this to 20 and make it even more pronounced, the margin outside of this container is 20 now, and the padding is still 5. So if I do 0, oh, it would help if, this one's affecting the other one. Okay. So this container, this one containing these 3 items, has no margin, and now you see if I don't select anything, if I don't select anything, the white edge is tight to the black container, the black background container. So margins are outside of the container, and then if I increase this to 20, 20, not 220, the space inside, I'll do 50. So everything has this width right here is 50. So the reason why everything defaults, all containers default to 5, is because if there was no padding, dropping items inside containers would be very difficult and really hard to get inside of it. Sometimes if I have a lot of nested containers, I'll use this kind of tree, the block selector, which is showing everything in a tree, so to speak, to move things around because it lets me do that. But otherwise, I really just, I only use it for tight spaces where I can't drag. I do prefer dragging things around. So that is the logic of containers, because sometimes people will ask, how do I get this tight to the edge? And it's because every container that is dropped has a 5 padding, 5 margin. What I like to do is get all my content into the containers and then go back into the containers. Even the header has it's a container and has its own padding and margin settings. So I like to go back after I have the content in there to change these to 0, because I don't need to drop further things in, and I can have things at 0. Okay. I think one other thing, that is helpful to know about containers and just navigating through the layer document view builder, is that I like clicking the item that's in a container and then clicking this up arrow to go one layer up. And if I open this block selector, I can click this. Okay, so when I click this, the project name, it highlights here. So project name is selected. And then I'll click here to go one up to the container. I find that that's the fastest way if I can't grab the container because the margins and padding are set to 0. That it's much easier to click the content than the container. So I'll click the content, go up, and it goes one level higher to the next item. It might be preference whether you use block selector or work on the page. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to delete this container and then start again. Another thing is that the headers have a default setting of 100. This one's a pretty small header height, content-wise, so I'm just going to make it 50. And I kind of use increments of 10 just to jump around because pixels are not really intuitive to inches for me, but I usually, if I want a spacer, will use 10 and just kind of adjust it. That's another way here when it says width is 150. If I make this 200, it also increases in height. So everything is, I kind of just adjust relative to each other. So now let's get into blocks, and don't forget to hit publish. Publish will save your layout and make sure that two people are not editing the same layout at the same time because your changes will overwrite each other. This rarely happens, but just something to watch out for. And in my, let's see, I will go here. So we'll get the element name, an image, and some fields on here. And I'll think of other tips that might help the setup of this. Oh, and then I do like going into other document views to see the setup. So I have a field in a container. These lines are generated. Well, this is a separator, but here, actually, if I go into, okay, this container has a border on the bottom. So I just like seeing the setup of existing projects that way and seeing how they're used. This one is in a 2-column container. Okay, oh, I didn't make any changes. Okay. So again, a 2-column container. This layout is a lot of nested containers. You can make these boxes because each item is its own container. And those container borders create this look. And I'm gonna jump back a little here and explain how document view works in general, is that it is a 1 page per element view of your element in this report layout that generates PDFs. So that was a mouthful, but what I mean is that, and let me zoom out a little here, this CH01 that was represented as in a table view with all of this information here, all of this information here is pulled onto this layout where we say put the element name here, put the manufacturer information here, and when I click next over here, let me update the element. Now we have a high back lounge chair where the description is here. So it's a 1 page per element view. And then when I'm editing the document, I'm editing the layout with the element information that it pertains to. So CH5 in this case. I'm not editing any information of these values on here. When I edit them here, like if I took out chair, high back, oops, I have to go to CH03. Okay, high back lounge chair. If I take away chair, it updates here, no more chair. So the information here is pulled onto here in this layout. So the document view builder is creating this layout. I publish it for any changes, I save it, I can close that, and I can just view this. Fun tip is that if I click this while it's not editing, I can open this and jump to that field here. So I could go to CH05, unit cost, now I'm on CH05, and have the unit cost. So this is handy product, oops. If I click finishes, it jumps to this field. So that's something's helpful, just to note that's when I'm not editing. When I am editing it, clicking this will get me to the block that it is and have the settings of the block. Okay, let me jump back to Scratch and keep on building this. We're going to do a 2-column container. Oops, didn't get that in. And oops, let me get a little closer. Okay. So this container has the padding and margin settings. When I click up, so this is one of the containers that's the default way that these multi-column containers are created. When I go up into this 2-column container here, it's where I can adjust the width of this. So you could get different column sizes. So there's kind of like the content container, and then there's the structure of the 2-column container. That is nested in the root container. Is that right? No, I made another container that I put that in. There's a lot of nested containers, and keep in mind that they each have their padding and margin. But once you have content and if you need to adjust things, this makes everything much simpler later on. So you're investing in this setup now. Once you have it, all your elements are there. So let's get some photos in here. Oh, and static text and static image are what they sound like. This is static text. So logos are static images. And this is compared to the element name. Let me just make this bigger. 18, bold. So publish to save it. We'll close out of exit mode. Static text is the same on every single page. So things that are not element specific, like the project name, number, submission date, those would be something you can fill in into static text. Like a product code. Let's say that's the setup I have where it says that. So you'll use this static text block to add that. Whereas element name changes per element, and that information is pulled, and that's what these blocks on the bottom are. So then we have element files here, but we also have a file type, product images, and we can put product images here. Show field name is product images. If I uncheck that, that disappears. I can make it center, make this 300 to make it a little bigger. And actually it's cutting it off, so let me do a fixed width first. Okay. So every block has its own, when you select it, has its own properties that you can adjust, and it's good to just click through and familiarize yourself with all of them. For the most part, it's probably alignment, which will be start, center, and end, and the size. And you can just adjust it relative to itself until you get it to what you want. There's also options for file names, captions, things like that. So you can play around with that. And when I put file name here, you can see that more options underneath show. So here's the file name style, the caption style. So it kind of adjusts like the different settings. You can, for the most part, there's a lot of any font style you can adjust. And field names. When the field name is shown, this is for all blocks. You can show the field name, and then you'll see, especially the ones that are text-based, you'll have a field name style and a field value style. So field name is element name, field value is the LO2 in this case. So I'm going to unselect the product image and go ahead and add a few more blocks to this. Let me check what the other one had. Status, responsibility. I'll just go down the list. And add a bunch of them. So status, and one thing that you'll see here, responsibility. Oh, okay. So part of my document styles is that automatic label width is turned off, and it's set to a label width of 135. What that is for the width, label width is it's referring to this field name, or this whole section is the field name style. So the width, label width is regarding the width of this field name, and after 135 pixels, it'll start the value, the approved. So I'm pointing this out because when I have a few different blocks here, I'll explain this one in a second. Manufacturer, well, actually these will all, I'll get into that a little more. We'll go to quantity, model number, model name. So actually, if I take the default style off, and a lot of times you'll start without a default style, especially if you're new to layer. So when you add things, let me put a spacer. Okay, vertical spacer defaults at 100. I usually just take away the 0 and make it 10 just to give it a little space. Maybe 20 actually. Okay, so let me add back underneath this block description, location, FF&E type. I'm just adding a bunch of them. Status, responsibility. Okay, so this is how when you start adding blocks onto the document view, they will just show up with this default Lotto font at 11 and the automatic label width on. And it's kind of centering the value in between the space between here and here. So I point this out because I actually like to use it with an automatic label width turned off and a set value. And I'll adjust this because what this does is essentially creates a second column of where your values fall. Everything's lined up here for the names, and then the values you're showing are all aligned at 135 pixels. So you can see that the default settings for document view, there's no bold on the description, and it's kind of moving a lot. So, and when you uncheck the automatic label width, it goes to 120, which is fine. I can, oops, I'll go back. Okay. So if I uncheck these, they're all going to align at 120. And then I can also go back and select bold to get it to that look. Let me, okay. So you can see it looks a little cleaner now. Let me just get out of the edit mode. This description part looks a little cleaner and everything's tighter. So I think if you set a document style, which I will put back now, it kind of saves you all that adjusting. And that document style is actually back into your company settings. So I just called it Arial 10. And its text style is like if you were placing static text. I just made everything Arial 10. Field names, I like bold. This is the label width. I turned off the automatic label width here, so that's where I can set all of that. This is just an unbolded Arial 10. Containers. I left this 5.5 because you need it. It helps a lot to add things into a container. No border styles here. And the image I left alone too. It's mostly just for the text. So let me go back. Okay, and I'm actually, let me point out a few more things. Here, this is CH01 actually has, all these images have 2 images. So there's a setting here to just show the first file only. And in this case, that works better, I think. And then let me get out of that. I'm going to delete these because they're redundant. Just wanted to show the difference with the default settings. And then I mentioned that this manufacturer, let me just make a little separate place for that. This manufacturer is what we call a related element field. And when you select the manufacturer, everything else, these lookups populate. So I'll do that again too. When I drop the manufacturer, which is our related element, manufacturer, when I drop it on here, it shows up as a table because you can add things from the manufacturer category on document view. So I could put the address here. And I can put the email here. So this is how we used to show it in the FF&E template, but I think people actually prefer seeing it line by line. So what I'm going to do is just do the list. And it defaults to having the manufacturer label on top of the text, but we want it beside. And when we have it beside, we're going to put it at 135 pixels wide. So then I'm going to put in the address, and I'll put in all the other fields. Phone, website. Okay. So as you can see, it says OFS everywhere. What you want to do is turn off show lookup element label, and it'll hide the OFS. And I think this is the way like you would want to see it, just like the other fields. Okay, so let's take a look at this. It's a little tight over here. This column probably wants to be a little wider on the left. So let's do that. I'm going to find that I'm in this container, find that 2-column container, and let's go back to 50/50. That's better, but there's a lot of blank space here. And I think these are still at 5/5. So let's make these zeros. And maybe this doesn't have to be 250, it could be 200. Or how does that look? Okay, that's not bad. I think it'll look better if this a little bigger, this was a little smaller. I think that's okay. But I think we also don't need so much space, so we can make this 65, and now my manufacturer information can fit across. I think that's pretty good for just getting started in document view, and then you can open up your element on the side and click through your different elements to see it, or I can go here and check out the field. And a few more things to point out is that we want to print things. So if I just want to export the full report, this screen on the side will pop up as it generates. You can also generate reports from here, export PDF report. You could get to your past reports. And the past reports actually shows up next to, if I click this, you can see that I'm on Files, which is here, Files, and it's this tab, Reports. So it's currently generating, and it has downloaded. Let me see. I should have stayed on that page because it would have generated a link on the bottom that you can share. But I think we can PDF, click to download the PDF, but also copy shareable link. So you can send that to someone and receive the download link to that PDF. And if I open that, we have our document view for all the elements set up. So this was a quick tutorial just to get started in document view. There's a lot more powerful things you can do, a lot more different layouts, and I'll get into that in the future. Thank you.